Don't embarrass us. My mother said it while adjusting my brother's tie, not even looking at me, like she was commenting on the weather or reminding someone to pick up milk. I wasn't planning to. No speeches, no stories, no bringing up your little research thing. Tonight is about Craig and Waverly, and the Ashfords are very important people. We can't have you rambling about lab work when everyone else is discussing real accomplishments. Real accomplishments. My brother sold luxury cars at a dealership in Scottsdale. He'd never finished college, never held a job for more than 2 years, never done anything except charm his way through life on good looks and easy confidence. I had a PhD in biomedical engineering. I led a research team developing affordable prosthetics for children in developing countries. Last year, our work was featured in Nature Medicine, but Craig was the golden child. Craig was the one who mattered. I understand, I said, because I'd learned decades ago that arguing was pointless. Good. Find a seat in the back somewhere. Mingle if you have to, but keep it short. And for God's sake, don't mention that you're not married. The Ashfords will think there's something wrong with our family. Something wrong with our family. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The engagement party was at the Ashford estate in Paradise Valley, a sprawling Mediterranean villa with views of Camelback Mountain and more square footage than most apartment buildings. Valets in white jackets parked cars that cost more than my annual salary. Caterers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably required a culinary degree to pronounce. I found a chair in the corner of the garden terrace, half hidden behind a potted olive tree. From there, I could watch without being watched, see without being seen. Craig worked the room like he'd been born for it. Handshake here, laugh there, arm around Waverly's waist as he steered her toward another cluster of her parents' wealthy friends. He was good at this. The performance, the charm, the effortless way he made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. I'd never had that gift. I was awkward at parties, better with data than small talk, more comfortable in a lab than a ballroom. My parents had made sure I knew this was a deficiency, a failure of character that needed constant correction. You could learn from your brother, my mother used to say. Watch how he connects with people. That's a real skill. That's what gets you somewhere in life. Where it got Craig was engaged to the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in Arizona. Richard Ashford had built a medical technology empire from nothing. Devices, diagnostics, innovations that had revolutionized patient care. The company was worth billions. And now my brother, who couldn't tell a circuit board from a cutting board, was about to marry into all of it. I didn't begrudge Waverly. From what I'd seen, she seemed genuinely sweet. A kindergarten teacher who'd chosen to work despite never needing the money. Someone who laughed easily and treated the catering staff like actual humans. Whatever she saw in Craig, I hoped it was real. But watching my parents preen and pander to her family, watching them position themselves for proximity to wealth they'd never earned, that turned my stomach. Is this seat taken? I looked up. An older woman in an elegant navy dress was gesturing to the chair beside me. No, please. She sat down with a soft sigh of relief. My feet are killing me. Catherine insisted on this venue, but she forgot that half her guests are over 60. She extended her hand. I'm Margaret Chen, friend of the family. Deanna Mercer, sister of the groom. Ah, Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. You're Craig's sister. I've heard about you. Here it comes, I thought. The questions about why I wasn't married, why I wasn't more like my brother, why I was hiding in the corner instead of celebrating. Richard mentions you sometimes, Margaret continued. From the board meetings. I blinked. I'm sorry? Ashford Medical Technologies. Richard serves on our hospital's board of directors, and he's been following your work for years. The pediatric prosthetics project? She smiled. He's quite impressed. Said you're doing the kind of work that actually changes lives. I didn't know how to respond. Richard Ashford knew my work? Had been following it? The idea seemed impossible. We'd never met, never spoken, never been in the same room until tonight. I didn't realize he was aware of what I do. Oh, very aware. He tried to recruit you once, you know. A few years back. Made an offer through your university, but apparently you turned it down. I remembered now. An inquiry from a medical technology company. Something about a consulting position that would have pulled me away from my research. I'd declined without even considering it seriously. Corporate work had never interested me, and the money hadn't been enough to change my mind. I hadn't known it was Richard Ashford's company. Hadn't connected the dots until this moment. I was focused on my research, I said. Consulting wasn't really... No need to explain. Richard understood. He said anyone that committed to their work was exactly the kind of person he wanted, which is exactly why he keeps trying. Margaret patted my hand. Don't be surprised if he corners you tonight. He's been hoping to meet you properly. Before I could respond, a server appeared to refill Margaret's champagne. She excused herself to find the restroom, leaving me alone with a head full of questions. Richard Ashford wanted to meet me, had been following my career, had tried to recruit me, and my parents had told me to sit in the corner and not embarrass them. The toasts began around 8 o'clock. Waverly's mother went first, a gracious speech about love and partnership, and the joy of welcoming Craig into their family. She didn't mention his job or his accomplishments, carefully sidestepping the obvious gap between what he'd achieved and what they had. Then my mother stood up. I tensed, gripping my champagne glass hard enough to leave fingerprints. When Craig was little, she began, I knew he was destined for great things. He has this gift, this ability to make everyone around him feel special, feel seen. That's rare in this world. That's valuable. She talked for 5 minutes about Craig's charm, Craig's potential, Craig's bright future now that he'd found Waverly. Not once did she mention anything he'd actually done. Not once did she acknowledge that his greatest accomplishment was convincing a wealthy woman to marry him. My father's toast was shorter, more awkward. He raised his glass to new beginnings and family, and sat down quickly, clearly uncomfortable with public speaking. Then, Richard Ashford stood. The room shifted. This was the toast everyone had been waiting for. The patriarch, the billionaire, the man whose approval meant everything to everyone in attendance. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, he began. Catherine and I are thrilled to celebrate our daughter's engagement, and we're looking forward to welcoming Craig into our family. Standard stuff. Polite, appropriate, exactly what everyone expected. When Wesley first told us about Craig, we did what any parents would do. We looked into him, his background, his work, his family. My stomach dropped. This was it. He was going to expose my brother, reveal whatever his background check had uncovered, humiliate my parents in front of everyone they were trying so desperately to impress. What we found, Richard continued, was a young man who's still figuring out his path. And that's fine. We've all been there. What matters is character, and Craig has shown us nothing but kindness toward our daughter. The room relaxed. My parents exchanged relieved glances. But during that research, we discovered something else. Something that's been on my mind ever since. Richard's eyes scanned the crowd, searching. Is Deanna Mercer here tonight? Every head in the room turned. My face went hot, my heart hammering against my ribs. There she is, hiding in the corner. Richard smiled, but there was something sharp in it. Please come up here. I'd like everyone to meet you properly. I couldn't move. My mother was staring at me with barely concealed horror. My father's face frozen in confusion. Craig looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Go on, Margaret Chen whispered from somewhere nearby. He doesn't bite. Somehow I stood. Somehow my legs carried me through the crowd, past the curious faces and whispered questions, up to where Richard Ashford waited with his champagne glass still in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. This is Dr. Deanna Mercer, Craig's sister, and one of the most brilliant biomedical engineers working today. The murmur that went through the crowd was audible. I saw my mother's mouth fall open, saw my father's brow furrow in confusion. For those who don't know, Dr. Mercer leads a research team that's developing affordable prosthetics for children who've lost limbs to disease, accidents, and war. Her work has been featured in Nature Medicine, recognized by the WHO, and implemented in 17 countries across 3 continents. Richard turned to face me directly. I've been trying to recruit her for years. She keeps turning me down because she'd rather help children than make money. That's the kind of person she is. I didn't know what to say. The attention was overwhelming. the praise almost painful after a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough. I bring this up, Richard continued, addressing the room again, because I think it's important for everyone here to understand what this family has produced, what potential exists. And I have to admit, I'm curious about something. He turned to my parents. His voice stayed pleasant, but his eyes had gone cold. Dawn and Pamela, I noticed that neither of you mentioned Deanna in your toasts. Not a single word about your daughter's accomplishments. I'm sure it was just an oversight. Easy to forget things when you're nervous, but I wanted to make sure she got proper recognition. The silence was absolute. My mother looked like she might faint. My father's face had gone a deep, mottled red. After all, Richard said, a family should be proud of all their children, don't you think? It wasn't a question. It was an indictment, delivered with the precision of a surgeon and the force of a sledgehammer. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Of course we're proud of Deanna, she finally managed. We just didn't want to take attention away from Craig and Waverly's special night by mentioning that their sister is a world-renowned scientist. Richard's eyebrow rose. I think most people would consider that a highlight, not a distraction. It's complicated, my father interjected. Deanna's work is very technical, and we didn't think people wouldn't understand, wouldn't care. Richard's smile didn't waver, but his voice had developed an edge. I run a medical technology company. Half the people in this room have advanced degrees. I think we could have followed along. Craig stepped forward, trying to salvage the moment. Dad, Mom, it's fine. We can talk about this later. Richard, thank you for the kind words about my sister. We're all very proud of her. It was the first time my brother had ever publicly acknowledged my work. The words sounded hollow, forced, like he was reading from a script he'd just been handed. Are you? Richard asked. I only ask because when we looked into your family, we noticed something interesting. Deanna's name doesn't appear on any of your social media. Not your posts, not your photos, not your holiday cards. It's almost as if you've been editing her out. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the fountain gurgling in the garden below. That's a family matter, my mother said, her voice tight with controlled fury. I don't think this is the appropriate venue. You're right. It's not. Richard set down his champagne glass. But since we're here, and since my daughter is about to join this family, I think it's important to establish some things clearly. He turned to Waverly, who was watching the scene with wide eyes. Sweetheart, I want you to know that I support your choice. Craig seems like a good man, and I believe he loves you. But I also want you to understand what you're marrying into. A family that hides their most accomplished member in the corner. A family that tells her not to speak because she might embarrass them. Waverly's head snapped toward my parents. You told her not to speak? It wasn't like that, my mother started. I heard you. A new voice. Quiet but clear. One of the caterers, a young woman in a white shirt and black vest, had stepped forward. In the entrance hall. You told her to sit in the back and not mention her work. You said the Ashfords would think there was something wrong with your family if she talked about being unmarried. My mother's face went white. Is this true? Waverly asked, her voice harder now. Did you actually say that? People misunderstand things, my father attempted. The girl obviously didn't hear the full context. I heard enough. The caterer crossed her arms. I'm pre-med at ASU. When I realized who Dr. Mercer was, I wanted to ask for her autograph. Then I heard her own mother telling her to hide. It was disgusting. The murmur that rippled through the crowd was no longer curious. It was judgmental. Richard raised his hand, and the room went silent again. I've said what I needed to say. The rest is up to Craig and Waverly to sort out. He turned to me. Dr. Mercer, I apologize if I've made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention. I simply couldn't stand by and watch someone I admire be treated like an afterthought by people who should be celebrating her. Thank you, I whispered. It was all I could manage. And I meant what I said earlier. Whenever you're ready to take that consulting position, the offer stands. We need people like you. People who care more about impact than profit. He smiled, genuine this time. Think about it. The party didn't recover. Oh, people tried. The DJ started playing music again. The caterers circulated with fresh champagne. Conversations resumed in hushed, gossipy tones. But the atmosphere had shifted irreparably. What had been a celebration was now an autopsy. I found myself surrounded by people who suddenly wanted to know about my work. Board members from Richard's hospital, executives from medical device companies, academics who'd read my papers and wanted to discuss methodology. For the first time in my life, my family's social circle was interested in me. My parents retreated to a corner, the same corner where they'd banished me, and huddled in furious conference. I caught fragments of their conversation. Humiliated, ruined, never forgive her, never forgive me. As if I'd orchestrated any of this. As if Richard Ashford's speech was somehow my fault. Craig found me near the bar, his jaw tight, his easy charm nowhere in evidence. You planned this. Excuse me? You knew Richard was going to do that. You set this up to embarrass us. I stared at my brother, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years, saw the entitlement in his eyes, the absolute certainty that any negative outcome must be someone else's fault. I didn't plan anything. I did exactly what Mom told me to do. I sat in the corner and didn't speak. But you knew, I didn't know Richard Ashford was aware of my existence until an hour ago. I didn't know he'd tried to recruit me. I didn't know he'd been following my career. I set down my glass. If you want to blame someone, blame Mom and Dad. They're the ones who told me to hide. They're the ones who never mentioned me. If they'd just treated me like a normal member of the family, Richard would have had nothing to call out. It's exactly what it is. And you know what? I'm done apologizing for existing. I'm done making myself small so you can feel big. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I hope you and Waverly are happy together. I genuinely do. But I'm not going to pretend our family is normal anymore. Not for your engagement, not for your wedding, not for anything. I walked away before he could respond, found my coat, called a car, slipped out through the service entrance. The night air was cool and clean, a relief after the suffocating tension of the party. My phone buzzed before I reached the gate, a text from an unknown number. Dr. Mercer, this is Waverly. Richard gave me your number. I am so sorry for what happened tonight. Can we meet for coffee this week? I'd like to talk, not about Craig, about you, about your work, about the person my fiancé's family has been hiding. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, I'd like that. Let me know when you're free. Whatever happened with the engagement, whatever fallout came from tonight, at least one good thing had emerged. Waverly knew the truth now. She could make informed decisions about the family she was joining. That was more than anyone had ever given me. The wedding was 6 months later, smaller than originally planned. Waverly had insisted on scaling back after the incident, as my parents called it. Fewer guests, simpler venue, more focus on the actual marriage than the spectacle. I was invited. Specifically, personally invited. Not by Craig, but by Waverly herself. You're going to be my sister-in-law, she'd said over one of our coffee dates. I want you there. I want everyone to see that this family values all its members. My parents had protested, of course, threatened not to come if I was included in the wedding party. Waverly had called their bluff. Then don't come, she'd said. But if you skip your son's wedding because you can't stand being in the same room as your daughter, that says more about you than it does about her. They came. They sat in the front row with frozen smiles and clenched jaws, and they watched as Waverly's maid of honor gave a toast that mentioned me by name. To the Mercer family, she said, which is gaining an incredible sister-in-law today. Dr. Deanna Mercer, whose work has helped thousands of children around the world. May this marriage bring the same compassion and dedication to everyone it touches. The applause was genuine. My parents didn't clap. After the ceremony, Richard found me near the dessert table. Have you thought any more about my offer? I have. And I have a counter-proposal. His eyebrows rose. I'm listening. I don't want a consulting position. But I would be interested in a partnership. A foundation. Separate from your company, but funded by it. Focused on expanding access to pediatric prosthetics in underserved areas. Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. Send me a proposal. I'll have my people review it by end of week. Just like that? Dr. Mercer, I've been trying to work with you for years. If you're finally willing to let me help fund your mission, I'm not going to negotiate. I'm going to say yes, and figure out the details later. The foundation launched 8 months after that. Ashford Mercer Pediatric Prosthetics. Richard insisted on including my name, said it was important for people to know who was doing the actual work. We fitted our first 100 kids within the first year. By the end of year 2, we'd expanded to 12 additional countries. My parents watched all of this from a distance. They never called to congratulate me, never acknowledged the foundation, the press coverage, the lives being changed. Deanna's always been focused on her career, my mother would say when relatives brought it up, as if my work was a character flaw rather than an achievement. Craig and Waverly's marriage lasted 3 years. I wasn't surprised. The differences between them had been apparent from the beginning. She wanted partnership and growth. He wanted comfort and status. "I'm not blaming your family," Waverly told me after the divorce. "Craig made his own choices, but I gained something valuable from all of it." She gestured between us. "You, this friendship. You're the most genuine person I've ever met." Waverly joined the foundation's board. She brings a perspective I never would have found on my own. Her father jokes that he got a better daughter-in-law out of the divorce than he ever would have from the marriage. My parents eventually reached out, not with apologies, that wasn't their way, but with small gestures, forwarding articles about the foundation, mentioning my work to friends, treating me like someone who existed. It wasn't enough. It was also more than I'd ever expected. The foundation's 5th anniversary gala was held at the Ashford Estate, the same venue where I'd once hidden in the corner. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd and saw my mother sitting in the front row, not the corner, front and center. "5 years ago," I began, "someone very wise forced this room to see me clearly. He refused to let me be hidden, dismissed, or forgotten. He taught me that the right people will always recognize value, even when the people closest to you can't." I found Richard's eyes in the crowd. He raised his glass slightly. "To the next 5 years, to the children still waiting, and to everyone who refused to let me sit in the corner." The applause was thunderous. "I still lead the research team, still develop prosthetics for children who need them, still prefer labs to ballrooms and data to small talk, but I don't hide anymore. When I walk into a room, I walk in like I belong there. When someone asks about my work, I tell them. It took 30 years and one very public toast to get here. It took a stranger seeing my value when my family couldn't. But I'm here now, standing in my own light, building something that matters. And I'm never going back to the corner. Not for anyone. Not ever again."